Alright, so Weeds is no more. The series finale has aired, and the weeds have ceased to grow. No more little boxes. It's sad. So in this review, we'll be talking about Season 8, and especially the hour-long series finale that premiered last night. So if you haven't seen the finale, or if you aren't caught up on the Season 8, don't watch, because I'm going to spoil some things. Okay, so Season 8 picks up really great, because even if you don't like Season 7, you have to admit that the end, the season finale is fantastic. You know, shot at the family dinner table, you don't know who's been hit. I mean, it's pretty obvious that it was going towards Nancy, and they had this whole campaign, like, who got smoked and who died, and then, oh, look, no one died, but Nancy got shot in the head, but she's gonna live because she's fucking Nancy. I mean, it was nice to see her finally get, like, at least scraped, because she has been in so many dangerous situations and just made it out completely unscathed. So, it was nice, in a weird way. And like a lot of the previous seasons, it quickly loses its momentum created from the very beginning. I expect this to be a really big deal, and they kind of assuage it and, you know, ameliorate that problem in, like, 3 episodes. You quickly find out that it is Tim Scottson, Peter Scottson, DEA agent, Nancy's former husband, his son, and he's coming for vengeance because he basically put 2 and 2 together, or at least just he's always hated Nancy, and I like that they brought him back. I'm forgetting the actor's name, but he was in, like, Spy Kids and Keeping Up with the Steins and that stuff. I mean, that's all the way back from the first 3 seasons, and it was never really mentioned too much after that. I mean, there were some implications with, you know, Roy Till and then his involvement with Nancy based on relationship with Peter, but that doesn't say that it wasn't really good. In the beginning of Season 8, when they were, there was this great tension. Even Season 1 ends on somewhat of a cliffhanger yet again. I did like the setup where everybody was together and they were making it work with Stevie, and Jill was there, and Shane. I didn't necessarily like that Shane was in the police academy, but, you know, Silas is growing, and it just was this nice family environment. But the problem with this season is my problem with a lot of other seasons, but most forefront of them all, is that there is this episodal importance complex where they bring up these things that they matter for maybe 1 or 2 episodes, but have completely no relevance to things that will later happen. And of course, not everything that happens is bound to come up later. But it feels like they just kept switching what they wanted to do with this season, which is not a good thing for your last season, because it was nice to see them go through all these different little things and just show them living their life for some relative calm, because it's definitely the calmest of all the seasons for the most part. Seeing how they were going to settle down, but especially when you consider this series finale, it makes it seem even less important. Like, I like what was going on with Doug's character, because no matter what he does, it's always funny. I liked the fact that he kind of had to face the whole him just being a terrible person, he's got to do this charity, and I liked that. I thought that was cool. But with Nancy, like, oh, I want to deal, I don't want to deal, I don't want to deal, I don't want to. I mean, that's always been the nature of her character, but it was just emphasized by the show had no direction this season. And while there were some episodes where I was like, wow, you know, this feels like classic Weeds, where there's basically this sense, or, you know, Nancy's looking around, and there's just this crazy shit happening with, like, each one of her kids and all of her, you know, family, and just everything's just weird, and it just felt right. That's how it should feel. And that did happen. There were some really great episodes in the season, but they just didn't connect very well. There wasn't this overarching importance. Like with them growing for the pharmaceutical company. Silas, that was something that would have been cool, but they could have condensed the middle section of this season all back into the first couple episodes, deal with the thing with, you know, Tim quickly, because they did do that fairly well, maybe spruce it up a little bit, and then just quickly get them out of the business that was started in Season 7, move into this new thing, focusing on medicinal marijuana, or just basically the fact that it could be legalized sometime very soon, because that's always been something recurrent throughout the show, is medicinal and legal marijuana, and how they would deal with that. And that's definitely where it was going towards the end of the season. So they should have, you know, they did add that in with the whole Southern guy who, you know, wanted Silas to grow down south, and that does come back, but I didn't like that. There was a whole bunch of little things there was a whole bunch of these little stories that I really liked, but they weren't necessary for the last season. The last season should have had much more of an importance. And talking about the end of Season 8, when they go back to Agrestic, that was probably the best episode in a very long time, but it felt rushed. It even felt like they were speaking the dialogue faster than they really should because they wanted to get so much into that one episode, which was definitely a problem because they realized, oh shit, we have 2 episodes left before the show's over, and now we want to do something really awesome. And I love that Agrestic episode. They should have put that should have been like the middle of the season. That should have basically what this season should have been the main focus, was them going back to Conrad and Guillermo and getting this business started. Maybe you would have fucking time for Celia. But yeah, it would have given them so much opportunity to make this very memorable ending, because people are very critical of season 8, but nobody really disliked that episode. That Regrestic episode was fan-freaking-tastic. So I think they should have just cut out a lot of this stuff that was just, like Andy getting married. What was the point of that? Yes, I get it's, he doesn't know what he wants to do with his life, and is he still in love with Nancy? But you could have found a much better way of dealing with that, because it was so stupid. It's not even resolved. And like Shane's character, they clearly had no clue what to do with Shane's character at the end of season 8, end of season 7, beginning of season 8, because he kind of goes into the Force to protect his family, but they just had no clue what they wanted to do with him. He had his girlfriend, but she was just kind of thrown in there to give him something to do, and then she's just gone. It was such a disappointing end to such a great character, especially the series finale. I want to move into that now. As I said, I don't like huge ellipses in shows. Ellipses, I don't fucking know. But, yeah, so all of a sudden, it's got to be like 10 years later in the series finale, because he was 13, and he was I think it's about 10 years later. And I liked grown-up Stevie. I actually thought he was really good, whoever the actor was that played him, and bringing up the part about his dad. And the show really aims to tackle a lot, and they bring back Marvin and Dean, and all of these great cameos. Talk about how Isabel is a sex change. That was really weird. The best way to describe the series finale is that it's just weird. That's all I can really say, is that it is a very weird episode. It's almost surreal. Doug has this religion thing, which was cool. It just seems like something Doug would do. And they bring back Justin Chatwin. And Justin Chatwin is, I had mentioned this in my review for 5 through 7, and I recorded that before I saw this episode, that he was in the first episode and barely ever mentioned again, and then they bring him back, and they definitely try to make the parallels between the last episode ever and the first episode ever, because they use the Melvina Reynolds rendition of Little Boxes, which I think they try to do on more special episodes. And, they couldn't use the Agrestic opening because it wouldn't be relevant. They use the same closing songs, so they didn't bring Tim back. That was cool. It was random, but I like that. Nice little shout out there, I guess, cameo. And they even have the same type of opening conversation, the suburban parent thing with, oh wait, look, Nancy's husband's dead again. And that just kind of felt right. But I don't feel like she ever should have ended up with the rabbi. All of these things that, as I've said so many times, they choose to make these decisions pretty poorly and without a lot of calculation, but they always tend to do it somewhat right. It feels like it should and shouldn't be happening at the same time. Which prevents it, as I've said, from becoming an unwatchable show, but at the same time it is very aggravating. It just felt so unimportant at times for a series finale and a final season of a show, and that was really disappointing. But for the most part, I did like the series finale because it just threw back a lot of these characters that we loved, tried to make this relevance to full circle from beginning to end. But at the same time, I was not satisfied where these characters ended up. And yes, not every character is going to have a happy ending, but it just felt very unresolved at times. Like Shane character, there was somebody who said what the fuck did you do to Shane? And those are my thoughts exactly. Shane was one of the most interesting, likable, just best characters of the show, and he's pretty much destroyed. I liked where Silas ended up with Megan. I'm not a fan that Megan's a total bitch to Nancy, but I liked that, he went back there, and Shane just becoming this really sleazy, apathetic, douchey mustache guy. It just felt totally unnecessary, and I think they were trying to give something for the show to resolve in the last episode, and that was like the attempt, but it just didn't feel right. Looking back on how great the show once was, it is somewhat disappointing, but for what it was, I enjoyed most of the series finale, and I understand why it had such a huge gap for some reasons. When the episode first started and I realized that they were taking this huge gap of time, I still would have liked it to be a little shorter, but I was kind of happy because I was like, alright, they'll be able to resolve these problems that they probably wouldn't have been able to resolve immediately following the next episode, episode 11, because in order to have that resolution, you need some distance from the problems that were just at hand. So I can understand why they needed that extra time, but instead of that, they didn't really resolve anything. Shane was really like scummy now, and he just kind of got even worse from where he was. Her and Nancy and Andy's relationship was not improved at all. Nothing really happened. Silas and Megan pretty much went to where you would figure they would have gone, and then the operation, I understand why it did that, but it didn't take advantage of the fact that it did it. And the show really did just feel very weird, and still no Celia. The only explanation I've ever heard for why Celia is just gone is that the obvious is that she really had no relevance anymore, especially, in season 6, because they're on the run, and there's just no way to really tether them together. They could do it with Doug, because, Doug is, for one reason or another, Doug's somewhat of an essential character. So, but, I don't know why they couldn't have Elizabeth Perkins back for 1 or 2 episodes, seriously. Or even just mention her, there's no reason that Dean could have not just said what had happened to her. I could understand if they had some sort of conflict with Elizabeth Perkins and couldn't get her, but they still could have mentioned something. In a lot of ways, I almost kind of like the episode 11, the Regresstic episode, better as a series finale, which is weird because it's more of a cliffhanger than, it's kind of like a Weeds cliffhanger that you would expect. It kind of lets you imagine, live out the fantasy of a great show in your head where, they go off to grow and get ready for the dispensaries and whatnot. And, Shane wasn't necessarily going to become, a bad person, and Silas and Megan, that was set up, and you could have at least had the mystery about Andy and Nancy, but the series finale was just kind of depressing. And for a show like Weeds, with other shows, I'm okay that, if it's not a happy ending, because if it makes sense with, what the show is. But it wasn't even a shocking finale, or a cliffhanger, or anything, or just up in the air. It's just kind of depressing. It doesn't really make all the actions that have gone through the series seem worth it, because it pulls it full circle in a lot of ways, but it just kind of gets back to okay, yes, I understand they need to confront the fact that Nancy made some really bad decisions, and that it was, it screwed up her kid's life, and it wasn't really good for Andy, and that, there needed to be some sort of recognition of that, and some way to better that, at least for Andy, alright, I need to get away from you, but, I would have liked to kind of see them together, even though it probably would have been a little weird. Yeah, I just think there should have been something that made it seem like all of those seasons had this this carrying importance leading up to this end, where they accomplished something. It just kind of felt like, well, fuck, there was that line from Justin Chatwood, who's like, yeah, life's weird, or isn't, the world weird, and it was just kind of like, okay, yeah, that's the show, basically, but, and the fact that they kind of blame everything on Nancy. There was no, there really wasn't any, she was like, sorry, I, made things so bad for all of you guys, but none of them, took any blame for any of their own decisions, because they all had some questionable decisions of their own at times that, were probably related back to something Nancy did, but nonetheless. But the actual end of the show, where they're all out in the porch, about a couple minutes into the episode, I thought to myself, I was like, I feel like this episode is just going to end with them all toking up together, like the core 5, with Nancy, Silas, Shane, Andy, and Doug. It's just going to be them somewhere. But I thought it was more resolutely melancholy than I thought it would be, where they're just kind of sitting there like, well, this is where we are. And they kind of just have this acceptance of each other. Picturing something with a little more enjoyment, like, I'm happy we had this adventure together, because it was an adventure that was incredibly dangerous and pretty messed up. And messed up some, the childhoods there, but I don't know. There was just a lack of catharsis that I thought was the point of them taking this show, 10 years into the future, and be like, alright, now they can show you that in that time, because if they just picked up immediately after the last episode, that it would have made more sense for their soul to be some things up in the air, but it seems like things got progressively worse. But it was an enjoyable finale, and the very end was nice with the music playing from the first episode, and them just, passing around the joint. It was nice, but for something that people have invested so much time into, a little more resolution would have been nice. And I realize television is not always perfect, but I mean, one thing Weeds, even at its worst, usually their finales were amazing. And this wasn't bad. It was just really weird and a little disappointing. And I've been watching this show, since I was much younger, so it was a little sad, to let go of it and just the whole thing. And yeah, I'm definitely gonna miss this show. And with Showtime now, I mean, Dexter hasn't been hasn't been as good lately. Homeland, I mean, that's good. I think The Big C is ending soon, and that show kind of started to go downhill after, the first season. But yeah, The Weeds was one of my favorite. It's still one of my favorite shows out there. I still can. It has, unlike a lot of other shows, and I'll wind up reviewing Breaking Bad at some point. But I've heard some comparison because of their themes. But I don't find myself revisiting Breaking Bad as much. It's a better piece of television. It's more exciting and consistent. But even shows that I like more than Weeds, I find myself revisiting Weeds more, just because it's just one of those shows that I never get sick of watching. I'll always have that. I'll always have those great seasons, and I don't even mind the last couple, even though they could have been a lot better. So, tell me what your thoughts on the very, very end of Weeds are. Tell me your thoughts on the series finale of Weeds, what your thoughts on Season 8 were. And yeah, I'm going to really miss this show. I'm going to miss the glory days, but I'm also going to miss the lesser days too, just because the characters, they were always there. I'm going to miss it. Getting repetitive now, but it's sad. Goodbye, Weeds. You were fantastic for what you were. Great, great show, and I'm going to miss it.